I'm Ashna and I studied fashion PR at London College of Fashion, and today I'm going to talk to an expert about intellectual property.
Hello, I'm Eleanor Rockett. I'm the founder of Rockett Fashion, which is a fashion business consultancy supporting independent fashion businesses and startup designers. I am also a intellectual property educator at University of the Arts, London.
So my first question is, what is intellectual property and why is it important for creatives?
So intellectual property, some people are put off by the term because it's quite legal. But it's essentially valuable property which is stored inside of your brain. So it's all of your kind of ideas and everything that's produced by your brain when you're coming up with kind of concepts, projects, and all of those kind of ideas. So there's other types of business property that you might have if you have your own business, for example, laptops, machinery, sewing machines, and all sorts of things like this. But intellectual property is often a lot more valuable than these other types of traditional property, and it also is a lot easier to steal. It's very easy for people to kind of take your ideas and take your concepts. So I guess it is a genuine business asset, and it has a very strong financial value. When you actually look at kind of small and medium creative businesses, up to 75% of their market value can actually be the intellectual property. So if we look at a fashion business, for example, they might produce a 20-piece collection every season. These ideas, these pieces, these garments, that is their intellectual property. And that is obviously very, very, very valuable to fashion brands. And the same with somebody who is a freelance graphic designer. The value of their business is what they produce. It is their kind of graphic design ideas, their skills, and kind of their responses to different projects. So it might seem like legal jargon and something that you don't really want to be involved with, but it's really, really important, whether you're at uni or you've just graduated and you're about to start your business.
And my second question is, how can I protect my intellectual property as a creative?
So there are lots of simple, practical methods to protect your intellectual property. These are things like keeping a record of your sketches, keeping a record of your ideas, your designs. If you're a fashion designer, probably your toiles. If you're a product designer, samples, kind of anything that you've kind of made, a little sample of something, a little trial, all of that's really important. If you're a fashion designer, things like tech packs, that's extremely important. Keep a record of everything. Make sure that you've kind of dated everything in your folders, you've backed everything up properly. If you've made anything physical that you obviously can't date stamp on your laptop, make sure you take photographs of it or take screenshots of your work if you're sharing it online. Essentially, the key is to have a date stamp and kind of different iterations of your designs backed up to kind of really have this evidence base for the development of your ideas. I think another key tip is if you're sharing your portfolio online, only share what you need to. You don't need to share your whole life's work. Somebody's not going to look through that if they want to hire you for an internship or a job. They want to just look at the best bits. So share the minimum you need to, and if you can, password protect your portfolio. This helps you to know exactly who's looking at your work and when, to help make sure that it's just not the whole world is viewing all of your information and all of your ideas and doing whatever they'd like with them. On your website, you can mark everything as confidential, and you can mark your images as copyrighted. And students often say to me and kind of our team that they're really worried about kind of asking anybody to sign confidentiality agreements or non-disclosure agreements. I think if you're sharing your work with someone, don't be afraid to ask them to sign something, to promise they're not going to tell anybody else, because it's so important to kind of protect your work, protect your ideas, because this is kind of how you monetize your creativity. So you need to protect it as closely as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are intellectual property rights and how do they work?
So most creative works are protected by copyright or design rights or other intellectual property rights. So essentially we can see them in two different groups. The first group is automatic rights. Now these are rights which you don't need to register, and they arise automatically when you create the work. So the first one of these is unregistered design rights. And these come into existence when a design is recorded or created, and it protects any part of the shape or configuration of the article, as long as it's original. So this kind of protects 3D aspects of the shape and product configuration. The second automatic right is copyright. This is the one that everyone will have heard about, but you might not know how it's applicable to your own work. So copyright protection is free and automatic. So in order to gain it, you must prove that your design is original, so it's not a copy of something. And it requires creative input to create, i.e. you put in some labour, you made something, or there's some skill involved in making it. When you've got this copyright, because it's arisen automatically in your work, you have an exclusive legal right to reproduce your design, issue copies of your design, or rent and lend the work out. Essentially, you've got control over this design. So they're the first category, which is automatic rights. And then the second category is registered rights. So these are registered design rights, trademarks, and patents. So when you've got a design, a work, a product, or something to protect, there are different steps that you can go through to register this to have really strong protection for it.
So if I'm going to set up my own business after I've graduated, what would I need to do to think about it in regard to intellectual property?
Well, it's always good to think about intellectual property when you're starting up. It's a really good kind of point to have in your mind when you're thinking about starting up. A lot of people, their first step would be to buy the domain name, you know, for their business, and register the business with Companies House. And when you're doing these things, also think about trademarking your brand name or your business name. You can search for existing ones online by just typing in search for trademarks, and it talks you through the process of registering your own trademark as well. Trademarks are used to protect logos and brand names, and if anybody uses your brand name without your permission, you can take legal action against them. So when I was setting up my business, Rockett Fashion, I first bought the domain name, then I registered it as a business at Companies House, and then at kind of the same time, I registered a trademark for Rockett Fashion, and I think it cost me £170 to register for, and that lasts for 10 years. So in 10 years time, if I'm still doing Rockett Fashion, I'll have to renew it. But that's kind of what I thought about at the start of my business, and it's quite a simple service-based business. If you're looking at a fashion design business that's has 5 key shapes each season, and you repeat the same shape but you change the fabrics, you might want to look at more extensive protection for your designs, such as registration, registered design rights. Or if you're an innovator or an inventor, you can protect your novel ideas through patents. Patents protect the way that something works rather than the way that it looks. So if you've created, I guess, a novel fibre solution from, I don't know, seaweed or something, you can protect this kind of solution and technology because it's a substance or a process or a methodology. And this lasts for 20 years, but it's a much harder process to get a patent than a trademark. And any of these things, if you're kind of struggling with them or need more advice, if you're a UAL student, there's loads of resources on creativeip.com. And if you're any other students, you can just have a look at the government website for intellectual property advice. There's loads of little videos on there. That's always a good place to start. And if you're unsure, you can contact a lawyer, especially if you're starting up your own business, and they can give you lots of advice about your requirements in terms of accounting and intellectual property, and that's always a strong place to start with a legal team.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you for giving us advice on that, especially because it's not something as a creative that we're aware of. It should hopefully make us more aware of how important it is.
Yeah, hopefully. I think the biggest takeaway that I'd kind of add at the end is just to be aware, to make sure you're aware of the basics of intellectual property, whether that be if you're sharing on social media or you're sending in your work for a competition. Make sure you're aware of what these people and what these websites and what everybody else is going to be able to do with your work. And awareness is really key to staying on top of all of this. You don't need to be a legal expert by any means, but just having this awareness is really helpful, really useful.
Thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you for having me.